Housing is something that's incredibly personal to me. I was housing insecure. For me, housing is a human right. 99% of our donors are small dollar donors. They're people who pitch in less than $200. In one of the richest countries in the world, no one should go hungry. And no one should be one medical emergency away from bankruptcy. It's unconscionable.
We are excited to be joined by Deja Foxx, a candidate hoping to represent Arizona's 7th Congressional District. You may also recognize her from the DNC as the lead on influencer strategy for Kamala Harris's campaign in 2024. I do want to start by saying thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is a sprint of a campaign. We're running to a July 15th special election here in Southern Arizona. And if elected, I'd be the youngest member of Congress and the first woman of our generation, Gen Z. So it's a history-making race, but just a few days left to do it.
Yes, both very exciting things that I hope to get into. And before we do discuss everything, I always like to kind of start with this question to give candidates the opportunity to briefly go into maybe their backstory or their vision, however you want to take it. What makes you the right candidate for not just the Democratic Party in this primary, but Arizona's 7th Congressional District?
I was born and raised here in Tucson, and I was raised by a single mom. It was programs like Section 8 that kept a roof over my head, or SNAP benefits that made it possible to have dinner on the table. Medicaid is what made it possible for me to go to the doctors when I was sick or get a physical so I could play sports in school. I was a free lunch kid in our public schools my entire life. And that is how I came to know politics. Right? It wasn't something I had to learn in a classroom or some career that I picked. It was something that impacted my daily life every day growing up, my coming of age. And I think we need more people in DC who have lived the policies that they're debating. These things that I pointed out, things like Medicaid or SNAP, are the same things that Donald Trump and his Republicans are attempting to slash in the budget bill that just most recently passed. And so when you ask what is the vision for this campaign, it's actually really simple. It's the idea that families like mine deserve more than to just get by. We deserve a shot at getting ahead. And that means that regardless of where your parents come from or how much money they make, you deserve to decide if and when to start a family. You should be able to afford both your rent and your groceries, right? These are not radical ideas, but they are at odds with Trump's agenda to line the pockets of his billionaire friends and make our families pay for it.
And I think that's perfect. The first thing I wanted to get into, because a lot of what will help families get ahead is kind of addressing affordability, which is something that I'm sure is a problem in Arizona. It's a problem everywhere. Will be even more so with the things like you spoke to that Trump is trying to cut. So my question to you was kind of just what legislation or even just types of action would you support to kind of address this, from, I don't know, like childcare to housing to even everyday necessities getting out of control? And then how do Democrats work with Republicans who are trying to actively dismantle these things?
Yeah. I mean, it is true that we are under a bit of a Trump trifecta right now, right? He has his hands on all levels of government. He's got the Supreme Court on speed dial. We are in a bad spot. And the truth of the matter is that people our age, right, who have seen Donald Trump running for president since I was 15 years old, know that if we don't do something now, things can and will get worse. That the systems he has pulled apart, somebody will have to rebuild. And I have a vision in which we elect young, bold progressives who get to rebuild in the vision, or rather, in the best interests of families like ours. And now that takes real policy. I want to point to what this affordability crisis looks like on an everyday level, right? It's things like gas, groceries, childcare, and rent. Housing is something that's incredibly personal to me. I was housing insecure, homeless in high school. I lived with a boyfriend. I bounced around between friends' houses when I was just 15 years old because my mom struggled with addiction and I was left on my own. And now when we think about how we address the housing crisis, we have to come back to our value statement. And for me, housing is a human right.
Yes.
And what that looks like in practice is investing in building more affordable housing, millions of units of it to keep up with the demand. And we have been doing site visits here in our district to see what programs are working well. I visited a community group called IMU 360 recently. They built 10 units of small but dignified homes where people 18 to 22 can move in. And these are folks who have been, living on the streets, who are formerly incarcerated, but are ready to turn things around. And they pay their rent every month. They're on a 3-year lease. And every month, half of their rent gets saved back so that at the end of their lease, at 3 years, they have a down payment ready for a home. That's the kind of housing project we need to be thinking about, not these Band-Aid solutions, but dignified housing that puts people on track to own homes, to be first-time homeowners. And so those are the kind of community initiatives I'm looking at right here in my district that are replicable all across the country, that invest in young people and their potential. Now, I also think that not only are things getting more expensive, but wages have not kept up. And so we need to increase the federal minimum wage. We're looking at something like $17 an hour. And I don't just say that flippantly. I have worked an hourly wage job. I worked at a gas station for over 2 years. I cleaned toilets at a gas station for $10 an hour. I know the value of a dollar. And then, the last piece is just standing up for those basic social services, things like SNAP and Medicaid, to make sure that people don't fall any further. In one of the richest countries in the world, no one should go hungry. And no one should be one medical emergency away from bankruptcy. It's unconscionable.
Yeah, and it seems the current administration and Republicans don't really have solutions to these things. So it is refreshing to hear someone who does, because when Trump is asked, he often says things like, drill more and stuff that won't really solve the problems. But that does kind of go into what I wanted to ask you next about, which was climate change, because I think that's something that us young people really understand that maybe older politicians don't to the same degree. I like that your platform mentions specifically holding polluters accountable, because I think that the transition to green energy gets discussed a lot, but not how to ward off the biggest culprits. So can you speak to how you believe we should address that and the benefits that all Americans would see, not just Arizonians?
You're right to say that people our age, our generation, have a different perspective on climate change. And that's because we are going to have to live through these plans that are theoretical for the other people voting on it, right? When they make plans around 2050 or 2075, those are just an idea for them. But for folks like us, we will have to live through it. In fact, we are making decisions on where we might want to start a family or buy a home based on its environmental viability, right? And places like Arizona are dealing with extreme heat. I know extreme heat because I grew up in Section 8 housing where I didn't have an AC. I had a swamp cooler in the summers. I didn't have a car. I waited outside at a bus stop with no shade in 107-degree weather. Our low-income families, our working families know climate change at the front lines and in a visceral way. And so it means also, as we talk about building more affordable housing, making sure that is with the environment in mind, right? In terms of where it is placed, and also the materials used and the energy efficiency. And then, I want to tie this back because I believe that environmental justice, housing justice, reproductive justice all go hand in hand, right? And one of the reasons that we see these polluters being able to, in effect, run our government, right? And our elected officials not voting in our best interest, but voting in the interest of special interests, is because of a fundamental discrepancy in our political system, which is that corporations are buying elections in this country. We have made a commitment to take zero corporate PAC dollars. We won't do it. And that means that we are able to stand up against big landlords that are jacking up rent prices, right? Property companies. We're also able to stand up against those polluters and vote only in the best interests of the people who we represent. And I think this is a model in our campaign, in that 99% of our donors are small dollar donors. They're people who pitch in less than $200. And when we ask ourselves, okay, who are you accountable to as a member of Congress? The money talks. And it's part of why we see such a discrepancy between our best interests and the way that so many members vote in Congress, especially when it comes to the climate and the environment.
And yeah, I totally agree. Something I speak about on my channel all the time is follow the money. That'll tell you where people are going to vote. I guess just a quick follow up on that. I assume then if you were in Congress, let's say a bill came across to keep corporate money out of campaigns, is that something you would then support?
Yeah, that's right. We would definitely fight, and this is a bipartisan effort, right? The No Corruption in Government Act, which would ban stock trading as well, is something we would push for. I've committed to not holding individual stocks while in Congress. I don't think anyone should be enriching themselves off of the position of public servant. And the same goes for corporate PAC money. Not only are we putting that in action before we are ever even in office, but it's something we would hold our fellow members of Congress to and challenge them, because even on our second debate here in Arizona, I asked everybody on the stage, because financial reports would not be available in this election because it's the special election until people had already started voting. And so I asked my fellow Democrats if they would make a commitment not to taking corporate PAC, or rather, if they would make a commitment to not take corporate PAC money. We've made this a central issue in our campaign and intend to bring that onto Congress.